Bonnie, did y'all hear what's going on? They are saying black people are excited. I say excited, about who? Clive Davis' death. Yes, baby. I got all these black Americans, people reacting to Clive Davis, and a lot of black people got a lot of stuff to say about Clive Davis, and I think we need to look at this. I sure do. We need to look at what the people got to say because we can add this to our notes on figuring out what's really going on here because ain't nobody going to tell us. Ain't nobody going to help us. We going to have to figure this out ourselves, right? All right. I just want to say thank you all for your likes, the shares, and the subscriptions. Please keep them up. I really appreciate it. So let's watch and see what's going on.
Documentary. 50 Cent, get on that.
I don't know if anybody heard yet, but Clive Davis, he just passed away. Some people might be sad, and some even might be celebrating, because Clive Davis, he has a complicated legacy. Over the years, we've seen some incidents with Clive Davis and a lot of artists who used to be under his label. Him and Phyllis Hyman, they would get into it a lot, and eventually, he would kick her to the curb for Whitney Houston. When Whitney Houston died, there was a whole party going on that was hosted by him, and after receiving the news that she passed away, the party continued. And he was known to pay DJs to play certain songs from certain people, and this was a practice that a lot of people would do. But even with all of that, I think the people who suffered the most while working for Clive Davis was Milli Vanilli. By now, I think we all know the story about Milli Vanilli. They were signed to Clive Davis, and it turns out they weren't singing the songs that they were putting out. It was this big scandal, and Clive, just like everybody else, he couldn't believe that they weren't singing the songs. But truth is, he knew the whole time that they weren't the real singers. Everybody at Arista knew they were not the real singers. Have you heard Rob's voice? He has a strong German accent. What makes you think this is him really singing the songs? Clive let them get crucified by the media while he sat back and told everybody he had no idea, and everybody believed him. But he knew the whole time, a man who's been around for as long as he has, what makes you think he can't tell the difference? He's never heard their live vocals, and you being the head of a record label, you don't find that strange? But because Milli Vanilli was so popular and they were selling so many records, he pretended like he didn't know. Because worst case scenario, if anybody does find out, all Clive has to say is he didn't know, and they're gonna believe him. It's Clive Davis. But he knew the whole time, and so many people who worked at the record label, they knew as well. And the fallout from everything was awful. Milli Vanilli was not the same, and Rob would unalive himself a few years later. Even though what they did was bad, they did deserve that much heat, especially when people like Clive Davis and others, they knew about it the whole time.
Clive Davis was worth $850 million when he passed away at the age of 94, nice and comfortable in his home, and every dollar of that $850 million was built off the backs of artists who did not live to see 50. Now, in the first video, I told y'all about the airplanes. I told y'all about the unsolved murders. I told y'all about who bought the catalogs. I told you about who kept getting the checks after the artist passed. I told you about the clauses. And I told you about the post-death releases. But baby, today we're going to talk about the artist who screamed it. Who screamed out the pattern that I'm telling you about right now. And baby, buckle up, because these are the artists who screamed it publicly, who wrote it on signs, on their bodies, had witnesses, said it with speeches, and wrote it with their own words in songs. And their fate still ended up the same way. And this is where it goes from no longer being a pattern, but to something else entirely. Let's start in 1971, okay? Motown's #1 male recording artist signed to a label who told him what to say, what to write, what to record, when to record it, and how it should sound. But then he had something to say about the war in Vietnam, about police brutality, about the state of the world. And the label told him it was the worst thing they had ever heard, and they refused to release it. He released it anyway, and it did so well that they were forced to renegotiate his contract, making him the highest earning black artist on that label. So he won that round, but the label kept coming. They altered and released his album without his consent, even after he said it was unfinished. So he left Motown. He made a comeback, won his first 2 Grammys, was on his first world tour, and was shot by his own father with a pew-pew he had given his father as a gift. Now, his daddy claimed it was self-defense, but that's neither here nor there. The label, the catalog, made the label over hundreds of millions of dollars. He fought the label his whole life, and the label outlived him and kept collecting checks off his voice and his name. 2002, Harlem. Let's talk about the artist who didn't just fight behind closed doors, but stood at a podium at a civil rights organization's headquarters one night in Harlem and said, with a minister standing next to him, recorded, documented, written down, these are his words. Throughout the years, black artists have been taken advantage of completely. People like James Brown, Sammy Davis Jr., the pioneers, the real pioneers who inspired me. These artists were always on tour because if they stopped touring, they would be broke. Then he said, the record companies do conspire against their artists. They steal, they cheat, they do whatever they can, especially against black artists. Then he said something that I think should have stopped the industry in its tracks. He said, we pioneer, we innovate. And at the end of the story, it's not an accident. It happens on purpose. And then he held up a sign of the name of his label, the CEO, with devil horns on his head, a pitchfork, and a tail. And the sign read, Sony Music Kills. That was in 2002, and he was leaving the label. He owned half their publishing, and they were furious about it. 7 years later, he's found in his home dead after a physician administered drugs, and this physician happened to be connected to the company that was orchestrating his comeback tour, the very company financing it. And after his death, the same label that he called out acquired 60% of his publishing estate, giving the label the rights to everything he spent his life protecting. He said it out loud in front of God and everybody, and the story still ended the same. The Brit Awards 1995, there was an artist who stopped using words altogether and instead changed his name legally to an unpronounceable symbol so that the record label could not own his identity. He appeared to an award show with the word slave written on his cheek. In one ceremony, his acceptance speech was 4 words. In concert, perfectly free. On record, slave. He told Rolling Stone that people think I'm a fool for writing slave on my face, but if I can't do what I want to do, what am I? He said, when you stop a man from dreaming, he becomes a slave. He said, I don't own my own music. I don't own my masters. When you don't own your masters, your master owns you. He eventually got his masters back in 2014, and 2 years later, he died without a will, with one of the largest vaults of unreleased music in recorded history of sound. And baby, when he died, the vault opened and the money started flowing to everyone but him. Now, I could go on, but the point is this. That man who died, worth $850 million, had an empire that was built on the backs of artists who never got to see that empire come to fruition, who never got to have the freedom of owning the art that they created. And they knew something was very wrong, and they named it. And where are they now? And who are the ones still collecting a check?
So Clive Davis has died. And who else is with me that, like, I just feel as if, like, Satan himself was like, my son, welcome. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be so dark, but that man, I feel as if it's evil. Like, spawn of the devil evil. Like, I'm behind so much more than what you actually think evil. And I just can't wrap my head around him actually being a good person. You know how sometimes you can, like, look at someone and be like, you know what? They seem like a decent person. They do. You can even see people that you know have made mistakes, hasn't had a perfect life. But you can be like, you know what? I feel as if that person has changed. I feel as if they do genuinely have a kind heart. They've made mistakes, but they have a kind heart. When I think about and see Clive Davis, all I see is darkness and negativity. I do. And I think that he is actually a mastermind behind a lot of messed up things in entertainment and also in politics. Yeah. Funny angle, right? Absolutely. I have some proof. But anyways. R.I.P.
Clive Davis passed away, and I feel like that might actually spark a change within the music industry. Because I feel like he was actually one of the main gatekeepers within the music industry. And so I feel like with, you know, these people who have been in charge of the music industry, and we know how crazy people's deals are and how the music industry just treats artists, I feel like with one of the main gatekeepers no longer there, I feel like people are going to start speaking out more about the music industry. And also the fact that Clive Davis hosted his Grammy party knowing that Whitney Houston was not alive upstairs in one of the rooms of the hotel. Like, that's crazy. And also, whatever note that was passed to Brandy from Whitney Houston, like, I'm gonna just need the information to start coming out because Brandy looked scared. And that's another thing. I feel like there were probably people within the music industry, specifically artists, who were scared of Clive Davis. And I don't know that to be 100% fact, but just by the way things look and how the music industry is and how we already know it is, I'm just assuming that when there's a gatekeeper who's been in that position of power for decades, there are people who don't necessarily want to cross him or upset him or whatever the case may be. Also, it's kind of weird how these record labels will take out life insurance policies on their artist and then the artist will pass away. Just crazy things. But I do feel like there's probably going to be a documentary about Clive Davis. I just feel like there would really be a major change within the music industry if people just basically started talking about what was happening in the music industry that they weren't necessarily speaking about before because of fear for what might happen or the influence of Clive Davis. I just feel like that's interesting, and I just want to know what was going on. Because I feel like now artists might come out and just say what was actually going on that maybe everyone doesn't know. But I feel like there are some things that are like, what? You know what I mean? I just find that interesting. And I just want to know. For real.
Music mogul, titan and entrepreneur Clive Davis has passed away at 94 years old. He's one of the biggest and most iconic executives in the music business. It's so interesting that when people pass away, I kind of feel like this is where we get to hear more about it. His name's been whispered about in the music industry for a very long time, in a negative sense, although he's very clearly very good at his job in terms of a music executive. Whitney Houston, Janis Joplin, Billy Joel, Patti LaBelle. There's like literally some of the biggest artists you've ever heard of all come through his music systems. He has done things with music executives and moguls, created partnerships with them, including things like Arista. He also did Bad Boy, which, you know, has questions around it. And every single time he's had, I know there's a Kelly Clarkson complaint, which is, apparently she featured in his memoir, and she was saying, if you talk about that, I'm going to talk about everything I think I know. It's been a question. And I kind of feel like we got to create a thread of a tribute to him, good and bad. What do you know about Clive Davis? Because even when I Googled it, there's a lot of things that are up, down, mid. Swiss Beats and Alicia Keys is another one of his artists, was giving him the biggest praise from the Dean family, sounded very highly esteemed. It's confusing. What do you know?
So you mean to tell me Clive Davis has passed away at the age of 94? I woke up shocked this morning because this man has single-handedly outlived majority of the artists he was connected to. And listen, I know that there are some people who are probably in his family or X, Y, and Z that are very, very sad. But what I am saying is I need a documentary. I need a documentary of the artists that he was connected to that seemingly had a weird passing that happened. You know, a lot of people don't like Clive Davis for the mere fact of when Whitney Houston passed away, he continued with his pre-Grammy party saying the show must go on, and they hadn't even removed Whitney Houston's body from upstairs. There are some people who don't like him because of what happened to Janis Joplin, Phyllis Hyman, all these artists that we've heard out throughout history. And I'll say this, okay? When they came for Diddy, a lot of us, including myself, was like, when is Clive going to be next? When is he going to be next? And Clive has escaped somehow. He escaped somehow, y'all. I don't know about y'all, but I grew up on the side of YouTube, okay, that talks about it all. That talks about it all. And I'll say this, if they were right about Diddy, allegedly, you know, he is in prison right now, allegedly, then what else could they have been right about? I need a